right. We are live. Hey, welcome to the Power Knot with Juan Boyce. And today's guest is a great guest. We have startup founder Jahque Gooden or no, Gooden Bryan. I'm
Brian.
sorry. You didn't put your full name there.
Brian.
I guess we're anonymous today. But but let's go ahead and get this thing started. My name is Juan Boyce. I am a self-taught engineer. I learned my first line of code by the time I was age 11, and I was building uh, full programs back in middle school where I was a middle school hacker. But today I am an engineering leader and I shape teams so that we can have the structure and just like a perfectly tied bow tie. So here on the Power Knot, we um, we talk about tech and leadership, and all while tying a bow tie. And so let's before we get started, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. This is a live show, so if you will put your comments down, your questions in the comments, then we will be able to address that as the show goes. So that'll be extremely exciting. So let's go ahead and start with introducing our guest. Today's guest is Jahque Bryan-Gooden, a highly accomplished entrepreneur and education advocate who is building an AI-driven platform for culturally responsive education. Jahque is not only the founder of this innovative ed tech adventure, she also brings deep expertise in the space, having founded Youth Relink and Rethink and served as curriculum developer and professional development facilitator. Her credentials and experience make her an invaluable voice in this industry. While her journey has included navigating the challenges of bootstrapping a startup, her passion for creating educational equity has been a guiding force. I'm honored to have her as a guest today, and I'm excited for you to hear about her vision, her mission, and the hurdles she's overcome in building something truly transformative. So, Jahque, thank you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that. I don't know why you appeared here on my
Uh,
little live stream here.
Anything for you, Han. I'm happy to be in the company of your genius, and that you created this space and platform. So thank you for having me.
Oh, that's great. But before we get started, let's tell me about your ties. Is there a story behind it?
Well, the first thing is that I actually do not wear bow ties, but I got one for this occasion. Yellow represents joy and happiness, and I feel like that is something that we all need a little sprinkling of. Um, yeah, that's basically why I gravitated towards this color. So that's pretty much it. Um,
Oh, did you go to a place that had a lot of bow ties? In my personal experience, whenever I go to the store, they have tons of neckties, but you might have one sad little bow tie. You must have better stores than me.
maybe. I mean, that's a good observation. I think next time I go and I look at bow ties, especially when my kid gets older, my son gets older, I'll be more aware of the neckties and bow ties.
Oh. Well, I'm glad that you had a choice of color. Obviously today is an orange day, so I'll show you today's bow tie. This is a fun little bow tie with all these colors here. So I don't know. I guess I woke up today and said, yes, this is what called to me. I have a few bow ties. Well, let's see if in future episodes you ever see any repeats. So let's go ahead and start with the first question. First, what is your startup and how did you validate your solution in the education space?
Yes. So my startup empowers educators to transform their curriculum into engaging student-centered experiences. It's a lesson and curriculum design tool. It provides practical application strategies that inspire and equip learners to think critically, connect deeply, and become active contributors to society. The validation part actually came because prior to becoming a founder of this startup, I was one of the authors of the Culturally Responsive Education Scorecard while I spent my time working at NYU. And that tool itself had over 50,000 downloads. It was used internationally. It was used in ways that I didn't think it would be used, right, by medical schools and dentistry programs, even though it was designed for the K-12 space. It's been adapted in higher ed. And so that tool really kind of became a catalyst to this work, because I kept hearing educators say, like, okay, now I know where my curriculum falls, right, as I'm evaluating it with community, from culturally responsive to culturally destructive, and collectively, right, because it is a collective evaluation process, they would constantly, it was an overwhelming amount of people that realized that curriculum is destructive to the students that they serve. And so some of the gaps were that, well, how do I make sure that every single lesson is responsive, right, and not destructive, instead of just sprinkling in heroes and holidays? And so with that challenge, I tried to figure out, okay, well, maybe that's not for me to solve, right? Like maybe someone is going to create curriculum that does embody culturally responsive education for every subject. But then, I realized that we're not fully there yet in the education space in terms of someone creating that for every subject. And so, and also because culturally responsive education is very contextualized in the sense that an experience in Arkansas is not going to be the same experience that you might encounter with students that are in Atlanta or in Charlotte. And so even if you create this mainstream curriculum, you still need to supplement it, right? And adapt it to the students you serve. And so that is how I came up with my idea. More specifically, there was an experience that I had at a think tank meeting. And I realized that, like, wow, how can I leverage AI and everything I know and everything I've heard about teachers' problem and come up with a solution? And so that is how I created my tool, right? Like with teachers at the forefront of my building. And then in terms of validating, I reached out to people that I know, I reached out to strangers, and people that were aligned with this work was like, well, I'd love to try it. And so I've been really fortunate to have really great feedback. And that's, that then allowed me to continuously iterate. And here I am today.
Oh wow, that's great. And it just sort of goes to remind you that you don't just want someone to do it. Someone has to do it. Why not you, right? You were clearly in the position to be able to identify the gap. Rather than wait for someone else to do it, you are being that someone. But you kept using the terms culturally destructive and culturally, or what is it, restorative? Responsive. Yeah. Could you define that for people like me who are unaware of those terms?
Yeah, I think I could define it, and I can also kind of show you what it looks like in practice in my tool. And so if you don't mind, is that fine for me to share?
Oh, are you going to share the screen?
No. I'm going to share. No. I'm kind of going to share examples of users.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, share examples. Yes.
Sure. So culturally responsive education encourages us to see that students are not blank slates, right? And so they come to school carrying a rich lived experience from their communities, from their homes. And those experiences are student knowledge, right? Like when you think about when you were a student, I mean, you clearly had great exposure to be able to start coding at the age of 12. And so I would love to know more about your educational experience. But to that point, you come with existing knowledge. And one of the core components of culturally responsive education is helping teachers bridge that knowledge to what's being taught in the classroom, right? So it's about making sure that whatever the student is learning is connected to all of the knowledge that they already have. And research shows that when students see themselves reflected in the curriculum, their engagement and comprehension skyrockets, right? Like if you're learning something that's connected to your experience, you are able to kind of decoded in a different way, right? And you're able to connect more to it. And so your comprehension increases. And that's why my tool helps educators design lessons that resonate on a deeper and more personal level to the students that they serve. But culturally responsive education is actually a lot more than just reflecting students' backgrounds. Like that's a component, but one of the components. It's also about setting the bar really high for what we believe students can achieve, and using education as a lever for social change. So if you think about it, right, I mean, the reality is that it is humans that give definition to the terms, right? But the underlying core values of culturally responsive education actually are reflected in Montessori education and problem-based learning and even gifted and talented programs. And that's because the goal, right, the end goal is to help every student reach their full potential, to develop a love for learning, to see the whole child, right, and to contribute meaningfully to their society and to their community.
Okay. It sounds like there's like a ton of value in having this culturally responsive learning. And I guess that brings me to my next question. A lot of founders chase VC money, but but for solutions built for overlooked communities, that door often isn't open. How did you find the resolve to build anyway? Because this sounds like something that is important, that could really help. So where is the VC money? You think they'd be throwing money at this? It sounds amazing to me.
Thank you. So you're right, in the sense that the door isn't always open. And sometimes I would say, especially in ed tech, there was a time where it was open, but it closed kind of quickly, right, before I was able to enter. And so what I mean by that is there are VCs that specifically focus on education, because the education space moves a lot slower in terms of like return on investment than other spaces. And so in ed tech, in terms of VC funding during the pandemic, there was actually a lot of money. Like that was kind of one of the most money that we saw with VC-backed ventures. But what happened is that a lot of ed tech companies ended up overpromising and underdelivering. And so we're here today and with increased caution, right, of like VC funders as well as schools who are like, I don't know if I need to invest in yet another tool. And so with all that being said, though, I didn't start building because I saw a clear path to funding. I started building because I saw a clear need. And so whenever those doors do open up, I enter those spaces, great. But I have to remain committed to my why, right? Like, why did I start doing this? And the fact that I saw a need. And I feel like because I'm so deeply connected to community, to teachers, and I value students, and I see those gaps in classrooms and the neighborhoods and lived experiences, I realize that like I can't wait for external validation because they might be waiting forever, right? They don't need to wait for me to get that VC funding in order for me to make an impact today. And so that's really where my resolve came from, right? Knowing that I'm building something for people to experience better now and not someday. And I surround myself with people who share that belief, and remind me that, the funding might come, but funding or not, like I don't need to be in a certain spotlight or be VC backed as long as I'm community fueled.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And instead of having this exist one day, let's go with day one. What can we do to start this and get the ball rolling? But really, bootstrapping a startup is no joke. What's been the hardest part so far, and what's kept you going?
So I actually loathe the concept of bootstrapping. And that's really because some of us don't even have a boot, right? So like, follow me here with this. when we we think about, okay, well, everyone needs to start off on the same footing, or everyone needs to start off the same starting point. But some of us might not have boots, whether it's due to historical inequities or personal reasons or both. And so in order to pull yourself up by bootstrap, right, like I said, you have to have the same starting point in order to enter the game. And so I had an idea. I made a prototype, right? I tested. And then I reached a point where I was like, okay, I'm ready for a first hire. Like, I need someone to help me build this out with code. And when I got to that point of like, oh, I'm so excited. I had this whole plan where I was going to save my money because at the time I was on monthly retainer with a client. And so I told myself like, that's how I'm going to fund my venture. And then I was abruptly released. And so I started out really without a boot, right? Because I had to think about, okay, well, now that stream of revenue is gone, how am I going to do the basic things, right? Like I have kids, I have a family, in addition to needing to fund my startup. And so I would say the hardest part is knowing that there is no safety net. There's no big bank account to fall back on. When you going back to VC funding, you need to have a friends and family round, right? And so thinking about like, well, I don't come from a family that has a whole bunch of money. I don't have friends that I'm sure they'd all give, but that would really meet the requirements of a friends and family round. And yet still needing to show up with clarity and creativity. And so there have been moments, from being honest, where I've wondered, like, am I moving fast enough? Should I go get a full-time job and save money and then come back to bootstrapping my business? So those are some of the hard things. And then what keeps me going is why I started. And so when I hear from a teacher about the way my tool has created more joy and lively classroom discussions, I'm refueled. And I remind myself that even on those really hard days, I am building something meaningful that would not exist otherwise.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, I can see that you're definitely building something that is creating that culturally responsive education. Well, and tell me, what does the culturally responsive education look like in practice, and how does the AI help that?
Yeah, so I'll touch on how AI helps, since I kind of previously shared like what culturally responsive education looks like. I used AI to scale, right? Like that's where it comes in. And when I say scale, I mean that not every school has the budget for an instructional coach, right? So to help them make sure that every single lesson meets some of those pillars, right? Of like home connection, family connection, reflecting on incorporating where the students live and driving change. And so AI has been able to help educators tailor their lessons, right? And get that lesson support in a way that is more cost efficient, is faster. And so it allows greater accessibility. And of course, right, like the human work of building the relationship with the student, that's irreplaceable and that is still on the teacher. It's just that my tool supports educators in becoming more effective at creating lessons that reflect some of those core goals I mentioned. And so that is how AI is leveraged in my tool.
Okay, yeah. I like that. I like that. And all right. Well, this is the part where we've all been expecting. Let's start tying the tie a little bit. Now, I usually use animal metaphors, but we're not going to talk about this. So instead of parrot on the shoulder, I'm just going to say this is a squirrel on your shoulder. That's a reference that no one's going to get.
A squirrel.
Yes. Oh no, but squirrels, they're cute. So this is my dominant hand. So you can see I've just got just where the tie starts to bell out. That's what we have. So we'll start, so that's easy. You want to have it nice and secure around your neck, because that's exactly how tight the tie is going to be.
Okay.
All right.
No, not quite.
No, not quite. You can see right here, right where it starts to bell out. That's where it starts, and then the rest is just kind of over my shoulder. It's just part. It's just out of the way right now. Okay. But this is actually going to become the front loop. So that'll give you, see, there you go. But for right now, let's leave it like that. Okay. Because unless you want to hold it that way for the rest of the interview, we can do that.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Whoa. Well, you know what? Spoiler alert. You're both a Black and a woman in tech entrepreneurship. What barriers have you faced that others might not even notice? Oh, I'm sorry if that was a big secret, by the
No.
way.
Surprise. No. Yeah, good question. So I think the answer to that is just realizing that less than 1% of all venture funding goes to Black women founders, right? Like less than 1%. And so that means that we're up against a system that routinely underestimates us and underinvests in us, no matter how strong our ideas or execution are. And so I think that that's something, right? Like just holding that with me while I continue to build and while other Black women continue to build. But I guess that is our lived experience, right? Like you have to work twice as hard, if not 3 times as hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to throw more statistics at you, but just women founders in general get something like 2% of the funding money. And from what I understand, women make up more than 2% of the population at large. And it's a small number of people that are Black, Indigenous, people of color that get funding as well.
Yeah.
And well, can you talk
And
perhaps about the intersectionality of that? Do you ever experience misogynoir?
um, I don't want to say that I'm like numb to it now, but
Oh,
I would just, which is probably not okay.
that sounds like a yes.
I mean,
Ouch.
yeah, I think the other piece is that to the more statistics as you shared, which is that according to statistics, women founders that have a male co-founder tend to get more funding. And so, I mean, I think it doesn't get any clearer than that, right? Like we clearly see men as more capable, or the patriarchy kind of rewards men in a way that we wouldn't women. And so, yeah. And I think even to the piece of how you shared, if it's 2% of women, right, regardless of race, and only 1% of Black women, that means we're not even at the same percentage of receiving funding, right? It's even less than all women. And so, yeah.
Oh, sorry to tell you too much truth. I'm an engineer, so I think in numbers on all the time. But and again, on engineering, let's talk about trade-offs. What have you had to say no to in order to build this on your own terms?
Yeah. Um, I think because of who I am, as well as because I'm in the education space, there hasn't been too much of building on my own terms. It's more so building. I mean, clearly I have things that I would like to see, right? And like I have a vision. But the and is that I'm building with community in mind, right? And I'm building with the people that I serve in mind. And I think that's really important. Now, there has been a time where I have said, okay, like I appreciate your suggestion, but I don't think I can do that. Now, not to the person directly, but I think one example is a teacher said that she loved the tool and she could see how it'd be useful for the rest of her colleagues. And then she said, like, oh, is there a way that you could incorporate lessons that allow us, that really reflect the standardized testing, right? Like, in the state that I'm in, we need to be able to prepare the kids, and can the tool help with that? And I'm not going to say that culturally responsive education and standardized test prep are kind of at odds or like polarities, but in a way, right? Because with culturally responsive education, as I had just mentioned, it is about connecting to community, connecting to home, bridging lived experiences with explaining with what's happening in the classroom, right? Like making sure they understand how what I'm learning is applicable to real life. Whereas standardized testing is not necessarily everything that you're going to experience in real life. And so sometimes it is at odds, right? Because the question is, so are you now teaching to the test, or are you teaching to the whole child? And so that was a request that I could not build out. And there's an and, which is typically how I decide to say, okay, yes, I'm going to add that as a feature, or yes, I'm going to modify this, is how many times am I hearing that, right? Like, is that something that multiple teachers have said? Or is it just something that one teacher has said? And so that is how I make the decision about what to build out.
All right. Okay. Well, we're about halfway through here, and I just want to remind people that this is live, and I can see your comments. It looks like Robert got the reference, but he was the one with the squirrel on his shoulder. That's neither here nor there. But let's go ahead and I can tell from that expression it's time to continue tying the tie. So what we do is you find like the part where it's widest, and then you just fold it right over your um there we go, just like that. And then this is going to be the front part of your loop. You want the middle of it to be right at your neck, right? Then you pull the rest of the tie that's off of your shoulder, and then it should be I don't know what that looks like. Again, I'm not. I said to my last guest, I'm going to find a different way of describing the tie. But let's say it looks like a fleur de lis or something like that. Not quite. But just because to keep things nice and awkward, let's ask one more question while you hold this. So, oh yeah. So tell me, the mission matters, but so does money. How do you balance purpose and profit as a founder?
Whew. Um, Honestly, I feel like becoming a startup founder has revealed a lot about myself and the ways that I personally need to improve and how I operate. And so, one thing I'm learning is really to release scarcity mindset. And that is something that I mean, it just keeps coming up. And I say that because I have to believe that I can build something that matters and make money, right? And so, because I shared earlier, right, like I'm a person that focuses so heavily on making sure what I'm building is functional, is useful, has value, right? Drives change and impact. Like that's so important to the mission and vision of my startup. And at the same time, I also have to make money. And so that's where the scarcity mindset comes in, right? Of saying like, well, you can do both. There is an abundance of opportunities. There is abundance of funding. And that it's waiting for me, you know? And so that's something that is an everyday battle, if I'm being honest. And I think it's also because I care so much about, educators. I know you're a software engineer, but in the education space, public school teachers do not get paid that well, right? And so every time I think about my tool and the way that it can support educators in being more effective, right? And not just saving time, I think about, okay, how can I be cognizant of the fact that like they also don't get paid that well? And so why would I need more money than, what an educator might be getting paid? But that's the scarcity mindset piece. I saw your facial expression changes. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll say this. Spoiler alert, I'm a black man. And the thing is that I believe there's a culture of a scarcity mindset among Black people. And that's something we really have to break ourselves out of, right? Um, the thing is that profit is not a bad thing. You have to make money in order to support the goal of what you're doing. Because if you don't make enough money for this to sustain itself, it cannot continue to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually hurting people for you to not charge enough money. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does.
Like hypothetically, I could go out and give my work for free, but not that my wife would allow me to do that. But
she shouldn't, and she should.
I would starve to death, but my wife will beat me to death first. Um,
Listen, we always need someone in our life that's like, no, raise the price. No, don't do that for free. And so I'm glad that she is your accountability buddy for that. So
oh yes, that's the thing. I love coding, so yeah, I might do some coding for free, but she's gonna say, don't let nobody take advantage of you. All right. Speaking of taking advantage, let's take advantage of this time, and this is the hard part. So we're gonna pull the front bow here, and then you're gonna pull this end, and there this should make a hole. And I'll turn to the side so you can see the hole. It's better if you pull the end of this tie with one hand, and you poke the finger. All right, you got that?
But is the hole the same hole on my neck? Like, is it this?
No, it's not the same hole. I'm not touching my neck. There's a hole right there. Did you not get the hole?
I don't think so.
I mean, look, we could start it over. It's very simple.
No, don't start
Again,
over.
it's a T.
Okay.
You pull the front bow, and you pull on the stem of that T with your thumb and forefinger, and you use your index finger to find the hole. Did you get that?
Listen, we're gonna try because.
Yes, that's what we got to do. We got to try.
Okay.
That's how we do it. And then once you have your finger through the hole, you can pinch your thumb and index finger together to grab the base of that T, and you have to push that piece of fabric through that hole to make a loop. That will be the back loop of your tie. So you're just going to very gently pull it through, because you don't want to pull it all the way, just enough to get a nice loop. You see how I have a loop here? Straighten that loop, and congratulations, you have a bow tie.
Okay, I'm struggling with the loop, but
It's okay. It's we're learning. We're in that learning space.
I mean, hey,
You know?
that's literally what it's like to be a startup founder. You are learning. You are as you go. Okay, learning and building simultaneously. I
Yeah,
think
learning and building. You're actually pretty close, but you're well, you know what? I'm gonna let you keep going.
oh,
I think you pulled the loop out. You're almost there. You're almost there.
is there a way to
It
tell?
looks like you have that T part again.
Oh. So wait, this supposed to wait, this goes where? Because look, that looks fine.
Yeah, that might be let's see, the loop is here. I forget yours is mirrored. You have the back loop, but somehow you pulled out your front loop. Yeah, that's what happened. You pulled out your front loop. We'll start over. But first, we'll ask another question. So, you're building something that challenges systems. How do you keep your vision grounded while navigating the real world constraints of startup life?
That is a loaded question, Juan. And so, for starters, the time we're in right now, everything is challenging the system. And so, in addition to my tool, yes, being designed to challenge the system. And I think that's okay, right? Like, the goal, again, was to be ambitious in the fact that I believe that students deserve better, that teachers need this adequate support in order to make sure that the students receive better. And so I'm okay with challenging the system in that way. I think in terms of where we are today, there's not a lot of conversation, at least in the bubble that I'm in, or the space, who I see on LinkedIn, of startups having the conversation that publicly that we are all figuring it out right now and trying not to like sit in the burning fire. So you know how, I don't know if you ever seen that meme. There's like Elmo, he's sitting with like a cup of coffee and there's fire everywhere. Have you ever seen that?
Oh no.
So just
Look, all this gray hair, I'm older than you.
I know, but
I've never seen that.
Okay, so just imagine, maybe it's Elmo, it's a dog, whichever GIF it is. Just imagine
I've seen the dog where it's in the fire and he says it's fine. I've never seen Elmo.
Okay,
the Elmo thing is new.
Let's go with the dog. Okay, maybe I'm mixing the two up. So let's go with the dog. That is what it feels like right now in the ed tech space, right? Because we have the potential closure of the U.S. Department of Education. We have conversation about, now what happens to federal funding? And if federal funding gets lost, in addition to NSF, right? So NSF would fund ed tech startups that are quite literally doing what I'm doing. And so it's interesting because I was so close to applying. I'm like, yeah, my tool supports with, all the things that they're looking for. And then that funding got pulled under this administration. And so I say that to say, we're all sitting here like, okay, this is fine. Like, we're going to figure out what it looks like to navigate this current time in education. And so you have all of those real life constraints. And then you also have, okay, well, where does that leave, my business or your business? Not you, but other people in the education space, right? Like, is it still necessary? And I would argue, especially based off of the feedback that I've gotten from educators, who say things like, oh, I teach first grade and I use your lesson tool and I got a totally different response. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And they said, usually my kids are saying, Miss, when is it time for lunch? Like, I'm ready to go. I've had enough. And so she'll tell them the time. And she said, and then I did lessons that your tool built out, and the students were so engaged in the math that they were doing. I said, hey, it's time for lunch. And they said, we don't want to go yet. Can we finish working on this? And that one, like, that is why I do this, right? Like, that is so powerful. And that really reflects what I talk about when I say, like, why I'm building this and, why we need education that students can get excited about being lifelong learners, right? Like, that's what education should be, like, you instilling a love for learning. And so I say that to say that experience and that testimony with the educator is really what allows me to continue building in these times, to know that what I'm building is necessary, regardless of all of the flames around me. And so I think one thing is, going back to what I said before, like, it's important it would be nice for other people to affirm, like, oh, it's not just you, right? Like, as in the ed tech space, we're all kind of feeling this. And how can we all support each other? But we're not there now. Now everyone's just like quietly figuring out how they're gonna pivot. I also think that my vision hasn't changed, right? Because it is my responsibility to make sure that I'm serving students and allowing other students and educators to have the experience that I just shared with you. And so there are times where I feel like it's the right idea in the wrong time, right? Like, that is the real life startup constraint as I'm thinking about what's going on. And then I remember that, one, hard times don't always last. And two, that is an essential part of startup life, right? It's one thing for me to take on the typical risks, right? There's risks with every startup. And that's why people say, oh, you have to be bold to be, an entrepreneur. I think it's when it's traditional risk in addition to unprecedented times. And so that becomes challenging, but I know that there is no reward without risk. And so, I'm just staying grounded until I say, all right, well, if this isn't working now, what else can I do to support you all during these times? But as of today, I'm going to keep pushing forward.
Okay. Well, I don't want to mansplain, your things back to you, but I'll give you perhaps an alternative interpretation, right? When you have when things are going just fine, people love the status quo. They say, why change this if it ain't broke? Don't fix it, right? Maybe having this disruption right now where you have budgets getting cut and you have a lot of uncertainty, this is the kick in the pants that a lot of educators and education systems need to even consider change, because you've already mentioned that things move slow in this market, right? The purchase decision cycles might take years, multiple years, right? But seeing education budgets get cut, well, that's definitely alarming. But parents care about the education of their children, right? I live in, at the risk of outing myself, I live in a good school district. And the reason that I might pay to have a house that costs more than the equivalent house elsewhere in this area is because I want my daughter to have uh, opportunities that she might not otherwise have. Um, and so um, this might be the catalyst that is necessary for people to consider the tool. People might say be more open to using tools that are and techniques and that are different from what they've been doing and what they have had before. Does that make sense, or am I just rambling a bunch of
I
nonsense?
think that there's two pieces there. So I think the first piece is that your desire to first, like you said, every parent cares about their child's education, right? And so the desire to want more exists. Like every person wants to make sure their child's going to flourish, that they're going to be well equipped to kind of navigate life after school and to pursue their dreams. I think the piece there is, though, there are people that have the ability to do that, and there are people that don't, based off of resources, based off of, like I said, those inequities that we're talking about. So there are parents that cannot afford to buy houses in nice neighborhoods, right? And the fact that we're still in 2025 and your zip code determines the quality of education you receive is a problem. And so that's not what my tool is addressing, but that is touching on all the work that I did and understanding that I have before I got to building this tool, right? And so I would say that there's a yes and, right? Like, yes, people want more for their child and people should have more for their child. And the and is without those additional fundings to make up for the gaps in those that cannot and those that can, we're going to start seeing, honestly, more disparities, right? Because then maybe you might not be aware, but then other families might see, oh, well, that person has that opportunity, but my family is not afforded that opportunity. And so I think the question and opportunity then comes like, well, now that the federal funding might be pulled, who is going to step up, right, and close those gaps to make sure that every child has opportunities to succeed and opportunities that align with their parents' desires for them to get a quality education. And so that's the first piece. I think the second piece is, you're right, that given the times we're in and the way that some schools are now going backwards and resorting to adopting older curriculum because they're not sure what's appropriate under this administration to be in the current curriculum, that there are other schools that might be like, yep, there's a need for the tool because we have to adopt something from the 1970s. And the kids are like, what is a coin purse, right? Like when doing math.
Coins, I remember coins.
Right.
Coins used to be worth money. Now they're metal garbage. Anyway, this is neither near.
Oh, listen, no, but it's see, and this is what I mean by culturally responsive education in practice. I'm like thinking about that because it's the coins and the coin purse. And so if you're teaching a child these math problems and you're like the coin purse, and they have no concept, no understanding of that because that is not an experience that they have, it's going to be harder for them to understand the math problem, right? And to solve the problem because there's the first barrier of, well, what is that? And so I'm being totally truthful when I say that there are school districts that are going back to adopting older curriculum because of the times that were, yes. And so that coin purse example is not antiquated, it's current. And so when we think about that, right, and that's just a coin purse. When we think about that, that is where the tool then can support because, okay, we can teach the same skill, right? Whatever the underlying skill is that you're trying to teach in terms of solving the math problem, and the tool is going to create now a math problem that is not a coin purse and that is connected to the students that you serve and where they live. And so they have more contextualized learning experience. So yeah, I don't know if that was a slight ramble, but
that's okay. That's like I said, it's live, and there'll be the it lives on in YouTube for posterity. So we'll get to replay that for forever and ever. It'll be at both of our funerals. So it'll be awesome. Yeah, but I'm wondering if just the disruption to the status quo, is might really help people to really use the tool. And part of funding is getting cut means that you've got to be more efficient. As you already mentioned, You know, ideally, we'd have an actual person who is an expert in culturally responsive education, but you cannot scale that in the same way that AI does. So maybe having a tool that makes existing lesson plans better and more effective allows the teachers to be more effective than they would otherwise, and that might be a better use of funds than hiring another human being. Not to say that we don't need more teachers.
Not to say we're gonna.
Not to say we don't need more teachers.
Not replacing. I want to make that clear.
No, I'm saying we're taking what we already have and making them more effective. As in your first grade teacher, you know, she was already a great teacher, I'm sure. Yeah. But for her students to be so engaged that they forgot about lunch, and school lunch is famously delicious. So yeah, so let's try this tie again here, and so I'm gonna do the steps you already know. We'll get that through. We cross over. See, I look for the wide end. That's making my front loop. I'm pulling this over. This is the cross. So now we've got like a T here. I'm holding this. I'm gonna let you catch up. Okay, this
that looks funny.
Yeah, it does look a little funny. It should look like this. It should look fairly symmetrical. Does mine look symmetrical?
Yeah, like this.
Almost. Okay, you're almost there. See, what you want to do is, while you have it crossed over, all I'm doing is this. Right over here, the middle of that where it dips is right at in the center of my neck. Then I cross the bar right over like this. Then I pull.
Here's where I got lost. Hold on. So I'm here, and then pull this inward like that.
You pull it out, like away from your neck.
Okay.
While at the same time pulling down on this part. This will expose the hole that you should be able to poke your.
Oh, is this the hole right here?
Yeah. See, okay. There you go. And then you just put the that base right through that hole.
Okay, so put the base and not the end, right?
Yes, the base, not the end. If you do the end, you'll have something totally different, not a bow tie.
Okay.
And then once you have just that loop in, you straighten that loop. I like to close my eyes because I just do it by feel. Or maybe I'm just being fancy and I'm rubbing it in. There we go. Then,
what happened?
What you're extremely close. You just need to tighten it a little bit, okay. Because it looks like your front loop pulled a bit. So like if you look at the front loop, see you've got a loop here, and then you've got no, that's my back loop. Your front loop is here in the front, and then you can pull it, but don't pull it out. Okay, that looks better. Straighten it out.
Okay.
Remember, we're going to take a picture, and it's going to be at our funerals, so no pressure.
All right.
No pressure.
I think I'm going to have to be slightly satisfied with this. I don't want to settle for something mediocre, but I think.
I think. Do you have two layers over here? I think you have it folded like this.
You have two.
Yeah. Almost. There you go, because it's two on each side.
Oh, I only have one on this side.
Yeah, you have this one folded over, like just push it over, right? So one is there. You go there. You go.
Oh, that looks bad.
I think that front loop just needs to be pulled.
Okay, like this. Pull it this way out.
Don't pull it out. But okay, that's workable for a photo. Okay. There we go. I think we're in good shape.
I think the good thing is that now that you've taught me, Juan, I have so many years to practice before my son goes to prom. And so
look, it's totally different. Let me tell you what I did. I actually have what have I done here? I've got my little stuffed animal here, and I tried to tie this on him, but I couldn't do it. I can only tie it this way. I can't tie it that way.
Wow.
Is that not crazy?
Okay, so that means that you'll just have to create another version of the podcast in which you teach people how to tie and
That's
slip
not
out.
how I do it. That's not how I do it. No, what you'll do is you'll have him look at this video, which by that time will be very, very old, and then maybe he'll learn it that way. Or who knows? Maybe in the future they're not wearing bow ties. All right. But hey, all right. Well, let's get to another question. Let's dream a little. If someone listening could help you, whether it's with customers, funding, or partnership, what kind of support would move the needle for you right now?
Yeah, great question. I love the opportunity to dream. I think that as I've shared before, like I'm really big on community. And being around people that see the vision and that, really value education that transforms both the student, the classroom, and transforms the student in order to transform society, right? And to improve society and give back. And well, not give back, but to drive positive change. And so because of that, I would love customers in the sense of they are teachers or principals that are watching and listening and that would love to do a demo and consider buying the tool. Like, let's start there and talk about your needs. In terms of partnerships, I think that there's a really great potential synergy between people that are in the space doing professional development and learning around any form of like pedagogy that is similar to culturally responsive education, and would love the opportunity to help teachers like take something with them, right, and to use it on a day-to-day in their classroom. And so if there are folks that fall into that category and know educators who, after your training are often like, okay, I've taken all this knowledge with me, but what does it look like to, apply it? Then I would love to form partnerships with you all. And yeah, I think that's what I could use right now. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you've mentioned before, we're all parents. Parents care about their children's educational outcomes. This is clearly something that improves the educational outcomes, especially for those children whose parents don't necessarily have the means to move to the best school district in their local metro area or whatnot. So that's um, that's a good thing. I don't know. Are there any other topics that perhaps we didn't cover here? Something that you want to mention here? And also, I'd like to remind anyone in the chat, put your comments here. I can see them. So, if you've got any questions, we'll love to be able to answer them.
Yeah. So I guess I'll give it a minute to see if there are questions. And
Oh, no. You can talk. No worries. I will see it. And, and if they come in, I'll just rudely interrupt you. Don't worry. I'm a man. No one will think twice about it. It's called patriarchy.
I guess I would just say for anyone listening that is in this place of considering a startup, it's really important for you to be surrounded by people who, support you. And also a lot of the journey is to just not give up. And so I'm so grateful for the way that while I don't have some of the financial resources, I have community that has really poured into me. And I'm like, like you, Juan, like other people that I see as my mentors, of teachers that are like, yeah, you know what, I will pilot this for as long as I can to help collect data for you. So many ways that people have supported me. And I think, again, that goes to the abundance mindset, right? Like, I have so much support. I have so much teacher backing and people that are like, I'm so glad you created this. And so sometimes where there might be lack, there is always the opportunity to count your other blessings and other fortunes twice. And that's where I count community. What else would I say? I'd also say that now is the time as we think about funding, right? We've talked a lot about VC, but there's also, options of grants, and there's options, in terms of philanthropy. And so when I think about that, I think about, if there's anyone that's in the philanthropy space, remembering that now more than ever, we need people to actually fund things that move the needle, right? Like you said, like now that the status quo might be shaken up, we still need people to continue to fund that impact. And so I'd say that. I'd also want to add, when I'm thinking about VC funding and all the things that I shared earlier, something that I just thought of, which is sometimes it's like, oh, I want the money, but people don't actually talk about what happens in order to get the money, right? Like, what are trade-offs there? Because sometimes there are trade-offs. And so one example is that earlier on, I actually did have someone that was just like, oh, I'll invest in you. But because I didn't have all of the experience that I needed, right? And people around me that are in the startup space, I had to do a lot of like Googling and then reaching out to other people who knew other people. So I'm grateful for their knowledge. And in that conversation, I realized that the person that was willing to fund me was in private equity. And that's a whole other beast, right? Because they have like two end goals. It is either we're going to sell, right? Because I want to make the most I can, or we're going to end up taking over and buying you out. And so they wanted a lot more equity than they were willing to give in terms of funding. And I really had to just sit with that. And I think that the beautiful thing about being a startup founder is that you have the choice. You can create things on your own term. And so I have the choice to say, oh, that does not work for me. And that does not work for where I want to go. And so I will say that experience has taught me something, which is, well, taught me a lot. But one of the other things it's taught me is that I want to build lean. And so when I say that, I mean, I would much rather have a small team that is incredibly capable than have a large company and I cannot sustain everyone's salary. Like when I think about like where I want to grow to. And so, yeah, those are the only two things that I could think of to share. I don't know if you have any other questions or thoughts.
Let me think here. No, well, this is what I would say here. I don't know. I don't have any thoughts right now. I'm just grateful that you took the time to speak with me and appear on here, and I hope that everyone who tuned in and is watching this found some value in this. So see, I think that's good. I should probably say, how would people reach out to you if they wanted to find out more about this startup? Perhaps if they are in a a school district and they want to find out more about this or whatnot.
Yes, great point. So you can visit my website, which is www.mycrebuddy.com. And so you can contact me there. My email's on that page. You can sign up there for a demo, and then I'll be in touch. And so that is the best way to reach me. So thank you for that. And LinkedIn, like you can, I'm not as active as you are, but I am, available on LinkedIn. And so reaching out to me via LinkedIn is good too.
Yeah, it's funny. I just realized we probably should have told people how to find you earlier, but that's okay. I'm sure they'll figure it out. They'll clip it up on TikTok, and we'll figure out how that works later. But yeah, definitely. Well, that's thank you for spending your time here. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream.
Thank
And
you.
thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yes,
All
thanks
right.
for having me, Juan.
All right. Bye.
What about our picture?
Oh, wait, hold on.